But yeah, it's so exciting to talk about Dogma. It's been a movie that um, I've meant to rewatch multiple times over the last few years and never really got to do that. One of the reasons being that it's not available anywhere, but then not also putting in the effort to actually go out and find it. So I was so glad when Dogma won for this Times Movie Club to actually get there. I would have watched a really bad copy on YouTube, but then luckily James came to the rescue. I don't know how you all like. Did you take advantage of James, or you have your own copy?
I own a copy of mine because I have one of the I guess the rare DVDs.
Yeah, same. I have I don't know if it's a special edition or if they just considered it a standard release, but it's a thicker set that has a feel of a leather-bound book on the side of it.
So I don't regret it, but fun fact, I had so many DVDs at one point. I bought like a bunch of CDK, like the big volumes of them, got rid of all the actual cases and just kept the DVDs.
I did the same with all of my collection. Not VHS. They're somewhere in my parents' basement probably, but like DVDs and Blu-rays. When I moved from Germany to the US like 11 years ago, I was like, I don't want to get rid of my collection, but I can't. Like, it doesn't physically fit in a suitcase. So I got rid of all the cases and put them into those old school like CD holder packages where you fit like 1,000 into one big booklet.
Yeah,
But I don't think.
I can't hold my cases.
I was gonna say, James, really?
But I don't think I've ever owned Dogma in it as a DVD. I think I owned it as a VHS. Again, I have no idea where that thing is. James, I have like you had the digital version. I don't want to ask you. You're on record here, so I don't want to ask you where you got that from.
It's on YouTube too.
I was about to say the problem is I wasn't going to bring this up. I wasn't going to bring this up since we're here. Once again, Harvey Weinstein likes to fuck everyone over at every opportunity. Because do you guys know the story behind that the whole thing?
Unfortunately, yes, I do.
I guess the quick story. He bought the rights back in the day because Disney didn't want to distribute it, so his company Miramax distributed it. Then, like years later, he called up Kevin Smith. He's like, we're cool, right? Maybe we should release Dogma as a special edition. Maybe you could do a Dogma too. Kevin Smith's just like, hey, yeah, that sounds great. The next day is when all the hit shit the fan and all the, everything came out. So ever since then, like Kevin Smith's donated any money he's gotten from Dogma to the, I forget, it's a women's foundation.
And I saw he tried to buy the rights back, but Weinstein tried to get like $5 million, and it's like outrageous for just a Blu-ray re-release or something, whatever they want to do with that. And then, he refuses to re-release it as like any other medium because he tries to avoid Weinstein getting any money off of it. So there's not going to be any agreement where that's going to happen unless he gets the rights back himself or someone else gets the rights.
And I was about to say it's crazy because some of my favorite films, like the creators don't have the rights to those films. And it's such a weird thing to think about.
And just in this case, it's even worse, right? I tried to do some research earlier, like well-known successful films or like movies overall that can't be released for XYZ reason. And Dogma's got to be like the best movie that can't be re-released or isn't available, not on streaming, not in physical form, nowhere. So there were some other movies there that sounded familiar. I don't think I've seen any of them. But there are some other movies that also, aren't being released. There is, let me see, I had this earlier, some Haunted, there's like Choose Me, The Moderns, Wild at Heart from 1990, Scandal from 89. But yeah, Dogma amongst those is like, probably to me, like the top tier best movie that's not available, and that's a shame.
So, was this ever? This was no one's first time watching this movie, right?
I seen it once
No.
years ago.
I was going to say,
I think I watched. Yeah, I think I watched it like 4 or 5 times in the early aughts. After it came out, I didn't watch it at the movies. I actually didn't know it came out of movies. So I came across it in like a video rental store in the early aughts, and like some friends watched the movie, and I watched it a few more times. Again, 4 or 5 times early aughts, and then I didn't watch it until like just a few days ago.
Was this your first Kevin Smith movie then, or?
So I did not know that. I didn't know who Kevin Smith was when the movie came out. Until I don't know. Probably when I moved to the US, he was a little bit bigger. But in Germany, it's not like that. There's a cult about Kevin. So maybe nowadays with the internet, but back then, people knew about Jay and Silent Bob and them showing up. I had no idea that Silent Bob is Kevin Smith. Like, actually, the person who made the movie when I first watched it, and it was just like, again, in the early aughts, was like, wow, crazy! Like, there's those 2 dudes that are showing up in various movies, like here and there, and then at some point they get their own movie, like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And that was kind of the phenomenon and stuff that like made the rounds. But again, without the internet at this time, it wasn't that anyone could look up or like what was behind it, who was who. Like, there weren't any pictures available of like, this is Kevin Smith. It's just like, no, it was a great movie. And Jay and Silent Bob showed up in that movie and in other movies, but it wasn't really a thing that's like, oh, this is a Kevin Smith movie and we should watch another Kevin Smith movie as well. It was more like Jay and Silent Bob popping up randomly.
What about you two? What number was this? Your first Kevin Smith movie?
I don't know if I was. No, I think Cort might have been my first one. I haven't seen all his movies.
So this was actually my second Kevin Smith movie. I just so happened to end up going to theaters to see Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and I learned that Kevin Smith, the writer of that, was writing Green Arrow. So I started reading that, and it's like, oh, this guy's got a good handle on characterization and dialogue. At least he did back then. What he did later for DC is a completely different story. But then I backtracked and started watching things from his initial film with Clerks and going through the Askewverse timeline. And it got to the point where every time there was a Kevin Smith movie coming out, I would go back and watch from the beginning of his catalog to the end to celebrate that next movie coming out, whether it would tie in or not.
So I'm the exact opposite of all y'all.
Which means?
I saw Mallrats like in middle school, like late middle school. Then the second movie I saw was Dogma. And I was a overweight white guy who wanted to be a film director. So Kevin Smith was my god. It took me a while to find Clerks, but like I had the Jay and Silent Bob soundtrack. I still do. Clerks the Animated is one of my favorites. I'm not even joking. Like, at one point I was drawing a Clerks comic, but it was a spoof on Anaconda. So like I said, I'm deep in the weeds. Like, I'm the opposite.
Speaking of comics, Steve, you made that mention. I didn't know that comic existed. Kind of the bridge between Chasing Amy and Dogma, the Chasing Dogma comic book as a tie-in. Has any? I assume you did, Steve, but anyone else read the comic?
Nope.
What do you think about it?
It's been decades because I know I read it because it's how they ended up in Chicago? No, it's not Chicago. Wisconsin.
So James, you haven't, and then Steve,
No.
did you enjoy it?
I reread it in prep for this, and I still really enjoy it because for those who will view these films as they should, because Smith has said that there's a connected story, it's nice to have a project that bridges the gap from one of his projects to the next. But it's also fascinating to read it knowing that that third issue, because it was a 4-issue series, is what eventually got morphed into Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, at least for a small sequence of it. So Smith has gone on record saying that the comic series is still canon, except for issue 3. But the nice thing is that you can toss out that third issue, just read 1, 2, and 4. It still forms a linear storyline. And you can move from Dogma then into Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back pretty seamlessly. The other nice thing, of course, was being reintroduced to characters from the Askewiverse. You get to see Brody in there. You get to see Trish the Dish in there. And it actually ends right as Jay and Silent Bob have to go in and confront the triplets as they enter the big sequence in Dogma. So it's really nice to see that. The only thing you really miss by not reading issue 3 is the whole story with Suzanne. But again, if you've seen Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, you see Kevin Smith's true intention behind that scene anyway.
So, fun fact, if you watch Clerks, at the very end, it says Jay and Silent Bob will return in Dogma. Because the idea was to do Dogma next. This was like, apparently even before, he wanted to always do like Dogma before Clerks. But the problem was, he's like, this is too big. So he kept kicking it down the road. Because also, Suzanne was actually Suzanne the orangutan was actually supposed to appear in Dogma originally, but he took that out and rewrote it for Jay and Silent Bob.
I ran out of time. I didn't expect the comic to be that long. I tried to read it digitally last night, and I started reading it, and I realized how many pages there were. So I read the beginning, and then from there I kind of skipped some dialogue. And I mean, the plot is also kind of straightforward. If you skip some dialogue, you're fine. Still understanding where this is going. I really like the integration there with Neil Patrick Harris, and I don't know if that was issue 3, the one that's not canon. I would love that to be canon because it also connects our movie clubs here. There's another connection to other movie clubs, but as Starship Troopers are being referenced, it's like, hey, you're this guy from Starship Troopers, and then Neil Patrick Harris. Like obviously back then, like that was his biggest role before he became more and more famous. But that was a nice tie in to previous movie club episodes. And then obviously how they ended up meeting Bethany.
I was going to say, because the crazy thing with like what's now known as the Askewiverse, because it's one of these things like, I kind of wish more, like everyone wants to have this giant cinematic universe. And in some ways, like, I think this kind of ruined Kevin Smith in a way. But it's like with a lot of these films and like in the comics and stuff, it's very loose threads that tie each other together. But when you have enough of them, it seems like a strong tapestry. Because if memory serves right, like Mallrats is first, because the girl who dies in Mallrats is the funeral that they go to in Clerks. And I forget how Chasing Amy connects, but it's like, so it's kind of crazy. Is like, it's popular now to say cinematic universe. I never thought of it this way. It almost felt like this was a high school that everyone went to, but instead of like we didn't see the high school years. We're seeing like everyone after high school.
Yeah, issue 2 is where Neil Patrick Harris shows up, and that's where he's part of the hospital set where Jay and Silent Bob are hired to be fluffers on the set of this pornographic film after they meet the porno actress. That's a pretty fun issue. And it had Harris featured in this role that he would kind of become famous for later on when Harold and Kumar made that style of persona popular for the actor.
I was going to say, because like it's been so long because I don't even remember him in it. But I'm curious if this was the like catalyst to get him in Harold and Kumar, because he definitely like, I don't know, his career was not where it is now, because he was kind of forgotten. It's like, oh yeah, you were Doogie Howser.
There's another nice tie-in to our movie clubs, which is the soundtrack. So you have Magic Moments playing in Dogma, and we had Magic Moments playing in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So I just found it very nice to. I mean, this is only the fourth, right? The fourth movie club here. And this movie kind of has connections to at least the two that focus actually on movies instead of just everything that was nominated for an Oscar, which was a little bit different movie club back then.
So, like I said, we're going deep in this. Another fun fact is, I didn't realize this. Kevin Smith helped produce Good Will Hunting, and that's how we got Ben Affleck and Matt Damon in this. Because originally it was supposed to be Ben Affleck and Jason Lee, who plays the demon, but Weinstein was like, not big enough a name, got to get someone bigger.
I remembered them being in the movie. Again, it has been like 20 years since I watched it. I did not remember all the star power that was in there. Like when I rewatched it, it's like, oh yeah, Salma Hayek is in there too, and oh, Chris Rock, and like, oh, there's like every role is almost filled with like a superstar name. And I mean, back then, whether they were big already or not, I didn't do that much research, like when they actually had their breakthroughs. Either he really got the stars back then, or he was just good at picking talent and they became famous anyways.
I can actually, sorry if I'm dominating the conversation, I can actually answer some of that. So Mallrats was one of Ben Affleck's first movies. Hence why he did like Chasing Amy. Him and Kevin Smith are very good personal friends, because he wrote and directed Good Will Hunting, and Kevin Smith helped produce that. So that's how they got him and Matt Damon. George Carlin was a fan of Chasing Amy along with Alan Rickman, and that's how they got onto this project. Because he's a horrible human monster, but Weinstein, especially in the 90s, had a lot of connection and power. So it's like that definitely helped with this. I don't think Salma Hayek was as big yet, because I don't know. From Dusk Till Dawn came before this, but it's like she hadn't had, I don't think, like a big breakout role. Oh, and then and I'm skipping on this because originally he wanted Kevin Smith wanted his then girlfriend, the main actress from Chasing Amy, to play the main part, but they didn't think she was big enough, so they recasted her with the current, I forget her name, which part of me is almost curious. I would love to have seen the original casting with man, I should really have their names.
It's just insane how much star power he got with. Like, I think the budget was 10 million, and obviously that wasn't all for a cast. Like, there's some special effects that ate some money, like locations, some splatter scenes, and just, I guess, building those wings that are functional, and they like to show them off, like, oh, they're functional. We have to here. The Metatron was like, I have to show off my wings and how they work a few times to make that investment work. But like on a 10 million budget to get like that kind of cast with those kinds of props, it's just insane.
I do know, because like with Smith, Mallrats was a disaster, because I think that was like 50 million. He made like Chasing Amy was like a shoestring budget, and he made a lot more money. So he had a medium-sized budget with this. But yeah, because like the Golgothan, I'm curious how much that thing costs.
Oh, the movie certainly made its money back. I think box office was 30 million. So they tripled the investment on the box office success. Obviously, no releases. I don't know since when, but for a while. So yeah, can only hope that they figure out. I don't know what's the expiration for that. So maybe in 90 years we get we get the license being freed up or something. I don't know. It would have to be someone else other than Kevin Smith or someone independent to get the license from Weinstein.
Or Weinstein dies, who's ever next in charge. Yeah. So anyway, let's talk about.
Let's hope for that.
I was gonna say enough about Weinstein. Let's talk about Two Angels banished to Wisconsin.
I think it's a great premise. Like Kevin Smith had to think about this for a long time. And I think he kept thinking about it after because, as you mentioned, he wanted to do Dogma 2. The only thing that kept him away, I read an interview yesterday where like an old one from 2005, where he was like, I want to make Dogma 2. The problem is he's like, I have kids now, I have a family. And in Dogma 2, I would have to include Islam, the Islam and Muslims. It's like, that's a whole different story if you mock them. You get death threats instead of just like, the church being offended, who cares? So I think that was one of the main reasons that kept him away. It's like, I'm not single anymore. I have to think about my family. I can't do this, but Dogma 2 without the Islam wouldn't make sense. And obviously that was from 2005, so he hasn't made Dogma 2 since, even if he had figured out the rights. But yeah, no, the premise of this, as you said, two angels finding a loophole, a legitimate loophole. It all checks out. I don't think the plot has any loopholes.
Especially,
go ahead.
Okay, spoiler alert. God's in there twice. But what's brilliant is it's like the two definitions of God everyone wants. Because in the opening of the movie, you had the old man with the white beard, which is the traditional, that's God, who's going off to play skee ball.
The thing that no one knows, the first shot is actually God.
But that's like
brilliant filmmaking.
That's your traditional, like, that's what God's supposed to look like. Like old man, white beard. That's supposed to be God. Yeah. And then it's Alanis Morissette, because I forget. A couple people turned it down. And in some ways, I'm like, the fact that it was Alanis Morissette makes this one of the most 90s film and like the best version.
When I watched the movie the first time, that was the only person I think I knew back in, like, again, I don't know if it was 99 or 2000, but close to release date. It was released in 99. I don't know when it made its way to the rental store on VHS. But so when we watched this, and I think everyone freaked out. It's like, because she was huge back then. She had to be the biggest star on the movie at that time. Obviously, by now, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck probably outpaced her. But back then, like, I think she was. I don't know what Beyonce might be today. Like, I don't know. I'm not that up to date with modern pop culture who would be comparable, but she was huge. Rewatching this, I feel like her parts were also very improvised. I don't think Kevin Smith wrote the part that she's like, well, you can't speak. Just do your thing. And she goes off and does a handstand and like the thing with the nose and like all of that things are very, very Alanis Morissette-ish. So I don't think anyone wrote this for her. She just did her thing. I mean, it's also, she doesn't have the longest screen time, but it was just a reveal of like, she is God. It's like, that was just mind blowing back then.
Also, because in that first scene, we got the Stygian triplets, which it's driving me nuts because I know that's a biblical term. But the other thing that was brilliant with those three, I don't know if you all noticed, anytime they moved, there was fly noises.
It might be
I
a
watched
weapon to
on my
the.
headphones. It got really annoying. I was like, the flies are like a little bit too much. I don't know if they crank the volume up on that. It's like, okay, that might be the only like the in the editorial process later on. They could have toned that down a bit. But yeah, no, it was very obvious that they showed up with the fly noises.
It might be a weapon to the three wishes from Abeth.
Maybe. Well, because the thing is, the three weird sisters from Macbeth are a nod to Norse mythology with the Nards, and Matt Damon's character's name clearly Loki. But yeah, like I said, because there's something about Stygian. I know that's a.
It relates to the river Styx, and every time you hear those flies, it's meant to be a reference to the underworld. And Smith intended for the music surrounding them to be extremely dark and foreboding. I think in some of the scenes, he definitely succeeded in creating that atmosphere with them.
Well, I guess to me, I always thought the fly thing was clever because you had the shit demon.
Yeah,
That's it.
But going back to God, one of the people that had originally been offered that role was Emma Thompson, who was pretty well known back then, but she had found out shortly before she was offered the role that she was pregnant, and so they had to recast. The X-Files was big when this was being filmed, and Smith loved the X-Files, so he actually asked that Gillian Anderson's agent hand her a copy of the script. Apparently, though, when she received it and started reading through it, she thought it was absolutely disgusting, distasteful, and she's gone on record as saying that she absolutely hated it back then, but it's something that she wished she had not have passed on, that she had seen the deeper meaning behind what Smith was going for. She just thought it was very childish back then, and yeah, Smith's known for that kind of humor, but there is a deeper message in this movie. So I'm satisfied with the cast we got, but it would have been interesting to see Scully in that role.
Yeah,
I love that. That's one of the parts that I actually fully read in the comic. I think it's on the like before the comic even starts. It's like the letter, and I didn't even read who the letter was from, so I read it. I thought it was a fan letter, writing about how disgusted that person that wrote the letter was by Jay and Silent Bob. How, as a feminist, she does not appreciate that kind of language, that kind of humor. But then throughout the process of making this movie, and the letter turned out to be from Alanis Morissette, she came to appreciate the unfiltered view, the unfiltered worldview of Jay, well, Silent Bob as well, as kind of, she's like, he's an accomplice. He's just as responsible for those actions as Jay is, but became appreciative of the unfiltered worldview of like, yeah, he's uncensored, unfiltered, and he says what he thinks. And she kind of like changed her opinion. I don't know whether that was because she was cast for that role and she like doing that movie, but in that letter she explains how she first had disdain, and then in the end, throughout the process, she came to realize that no, there's a deeper message also to Jay and Silent Bob of like not the naivety, but like the uncensored worldview, and like, hey, like that's also kind of what her personality stands for. Like, I don't think she has any kind of censor or filter in certain things. And like, she just does not care about anyone's opinions. She's not vain at all. And like throughout her career and in her music videos and in general, it's just like this normal nature of like, I don't care what you think about me. I do my thing. And I think that's what she appreciated there.
And that's why in some follow-up films, Smith has shown her appreciation. Example, one of her songs is featured in a very pivotal scene in Clerks 2, and that was his way of showing appreciation for not only her work, but being able to give him that second shot and actually taking part in this movie. Unfortunately, like I said, with Anderson, he didn't get that second shot. She just kind of looked at the surface and didn't look beneath. But that wasn't the only set of actors that kind of turned down roles. Albert Brooks, I believe, was originally intended to be the Cardinal and would not even read past the first few pages of the script. So Smith had to seek out someone else. Fortunately, George Carlin was not easily offended, so he was more than happy to take part in that role. The one thing that the studio and some of the fellow cast members kind of jabbed at Smith to reconsider, he had originally wanted, due to being a huge Pulp Fiction fan at the time, he wanted Sam Jackson to be Rufus. But people thought that Chris Rock would make for a better persona, and I am so glad that that's the route they went. As much as I love Sam Jackson, I think we already had him taking a religious stance in Pulp Fiction. It would have almost been typecasting to have him in a similar role. So Chris Rock did a stellar job.
So I agree 1,000% on the Chris Rock. Going to have one other point, then go into the Chris Rock. So fun fact, Kevin Smith originally wrote Jay for himself back in Clerks, but then he didn't think he could deliver the lines. So he had his pal Mewes, because he based the character off Mewes. So he's like, just say these lines. Because if memory serves right, Mewes did not remember half his lines. So
He was on drugs at the time.
I was going to say, what's crazy too with Dogma, it was at the height of his heroin addiction. Because if you watch, in the bar scene near the end of the movie, he's falling asleep because of that. But it's also, out of all the movies, it's the only one he remembered every line he remembered every line of the script, because Smith told him, it's like, if you fuck this up, Alan Rickman will leave and we won't have a movie. So he was terrified of offending Alan Rickman, even though Alan Rickman is I never said any of this.
So that's like the Catholic Church reigning with fear.
Exactly.
But back with Rufus, so apparently the scene where Rufus falls to the earth, that was the original scene Kevin Smith came up for with Dogma. That's always been in every version of this movie. And I agree. I love Samuel. I think he would have been a little too abrasive. And the thing with Kevin Smith, it's kind of weird. You need someone who's cartoony, who can deliver the lines, but in a serious way. That's why, and I forget his name, the lead from Mallrats doesn't work as well because he's not cartoony enough, where it's a Jason Lee worked really well and continues to work well with Smith. I will say this, though. Let's get into it. I had a little problem with Rufus's character because I think Kevin Smith took the lazy route with his character. So, and now with Rufus, it's the 13th apostle, wasn't mentioned because, quote unquote, the black apostle. One, what we know as white and black didn't really get invented until the late 1800s, because it used to be if you were Irish, you weren't considered the right skin. So back then it's okay, none of the apostles were white. They're Middle Eastern. Two, if you want to go that route and talking about religion, especially the Christian religion, not doing right by anyone who has, darker skin, the mark of fucking Cain is right there. So I don't know about all religions because I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but what we were taught, which I still remember when I was it all dawned on me because I'm wow, this is really fucked up. But back in ye olde day, there was two brothers, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and God punishes Cain by having the mark of Cain. In the Mormon religion, it's by having darker skin and being, African. So it's one of those, it's if you're going to bring up the racial thing, use that point. That is such a strong, deep in the Bible. So that was one of my only problems with this movie.
I'm trying to look this up because someone told me that a while ago, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. So I don't want to like repeat something that isn't true. I can't find it, so it might not be true. I say it anyways because what the heck? Take it with a grain of salt. It might not be true, but someone told me that. So Jesus is also so in the Quran. They don't ignore Jesus. They just say, well, Jesus is just another apostle, right? So he, either that or a prophet, one of the other, but he is like just one of the others that came in line, and Muhammad is actually the main guy. So yeah, it doesn't rhyme from that perspective to me, because if that's true, and again, I'm not, my knowledge on Bible or Quran is very, very high level, more than high level, like probably higher than God, where God sits. But yeah, if you go from that, then Rufus would not have a place, then Jesus would be the 13th apostle.
Also, I did forget about this, because what we know as Christ, I forget who it is. One of the Caesars based like Christ off, well, we know Christ off of his son. Because like when Jesus of Nazareth, if he was a real human, like was around, it's like he's the homeless dude hanging out with hookers and the leopards. He's not having portraits made of him. So all of a sudden, when the Romans adopt the religion, that's when one of the Caesars like, hey, my son kind of has a similar look. What if we make this official?
One other aspect I found interesting is the Virgin Mary had kids after Jesus was born. I was like, this actually, like, can you prove otherwise? Like, did Jesus have siblings? Obviously, he didn't, like, if he ever existed, yada, yada, yada. But let's assume this is all true. The Bible is true. Jesus existed. There could be a bloodline there. Like,
I'm 80%?
Wasn't that the part? Wasn't that the part of the Da Vinci Code?
Yeah. I'm also 80% sure that's part of the Church of Latter-day Saints doctrine. Because, like I said, that sequence of that was brilliant, though, especially like, yeah, to have faith in a virgin, but it's just like ignorance. To think a married couple would never get it on. It's like, that was some of the best Kevin Smith writing.
Yeah, it's all plausible, right? Like, I mean, her job was done. Jesus was born. She had some days left. Like, she had a life to live.
Yeah. After God got his turn, Joseph was like, I'm getting mine too. According to religious texts, Jesus did have several siblings, and a couple of them, James and Jose, are actually mentioned in the book of Mark. They are standing by Mary, as a matter of fact, in one of the famous paintings that came out of the Renaissance, as she's watching her son Jesus be crucified. So at the very least, those two are commemorated in some way, both in the book of Mark and in the painting. Other religious texts refer to, I think one of them is named Simon, and I know one of them is named Judas. No relation to Judas Iscariot, but it was considered a common name back
it would have happened also before the whole Judas thing, because like I don't think the kids are like 30 years apart. So yeah.
Well, I get into all kinds of fun religious discussions with my adopted sister, because there's the whole thing where Jesus did have a very familiar relationship with Mary Magdalene as well. So even though there are no religious texts out there within the Christian church to support that, hey, Jesus and this other Mary, we'll just call her Mary M, had a more intimate relationship, and Jesus did have kids. At the end of the day, whether he came from God or not, he was on earth for about 30 years. He was a man. Men have needs. Men fall in love. So who knows? But that gets her riled like crazy. So it makes for a really fun conversation.
Back in high school, I think it was like sophomore or junior year, I had a teacher ask, it was a history teacher, he's like, who's the most important human in the course of history? We're all trying to figure something out. And he finally, spoiler alert, you can probably figure it out because of this conversation. He finally goes, no, it's Jesus of Nazareth. He's like, look, the reason is if you're Christian, clear answer why Jesus is the most important person. If you're not a Christian, you still you interact with him every day of your life because the calendar is based around his death.
It's true.
Because I think like in a lot of religions, the idea is like Jesus had brothers and like half brothers and half sisters technically, but since they didn't have the divine spark, like they didn't have the powers of God.
Exactly.
And powers of his dad were missing.
I won't.
So you said, Josh, you said you like study. So what's the 20 years of experience or insight? Is that just your upbringing, or did you actually study?
I grew up in the Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ. No, that is literally going to church for like 20 something years, and then every day in high school Bible study, because we had the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, and Doctrine and Covenants.
That is a lot, Josh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. We're going to, you know what? We're going to tie this into comics, and I hope someone else listens to this because we're about to get really nerdy. Are you ready for this? So in this movie, they go to the toy store, and in the background, in the aisle, they have Madman merchandise because Mike Allred did the movie posters, one of the fake covers for Mallrats. Now, basic thing, not a big deal. This is where we're going to get nerdy. The plot of this movie is two fallen angels banned from heaven walking around Earth for eternity. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons, they have the four Nephites who show up in Madman because Madman is one of the Nephites, which is they weren't banished. They decided to stay back to help humanity. But same plot, four dudes since the crucifixion of Christ just roaming around this earth.
Kevin Smith knew his stuff.
Like I said, when I saw it was one of those, I'm like, I don't know if it was on purpose or if it was like, helping a friend. He's got some merch. Let's throw it in this fake toy store. But when I saw that connection, I was like, hot damn.
Yeah, beat for beat, even though this movie is not the art house style that Chasing Amy is, you can tell that Kevin Smith was very intentional with his choices because on the one hand, he wanted to make a good movie that had people think about some of their deep-seated beliefs that they would not normally speak about in public. But on the other hand, he also wanted to show that he did not give a crap if those who were saying they were religious but weren't really living by the religious doctrine got offended by it. One of the biggest mistakes I have personally noticed with those who declare themselves as Christian is that they say they live by it, but part of living by it is actually showing that through your actions. So you can say you love people as your brothers, but if you're going out, and I'm exaggerating here, if you're driving down the highway and you run over 6 pedestrians and you think it's okay just because you go to church on Sunday, that is not how that works. You don't have to be perfect. You have to live each day learning and growing in your own way to show that you are trying to live as the religious doctrine would expect you to.
Well, that's a perfect segue into one question that I have for you guys. 42. I have a very strong opinion on this, but do you guys think that this movie is blasphemous?
Oh, far from it.
It depends on who you are. I will say this. If we're looking at it, the surface detail, abso-fucking-lutely. I mean, 1,000%. And by surface detail, I mean like the way they look at the Catholic Church in certain ways, yada, yada. Like, the imagery, or just like if you're doing a quick pass, like, yes, it's 1,000% blasphemous, but it's also that's the intent. Because sometimes it's weird. If you have a little bit of pain, you'll remember something better. Now, here's the thing. Do I think it's blasphemous in the spirit or the message of the story? No, it's probably one of the more like true Christian ideal stories. Because especially when he talks about like, don't get hung up on the actual religion. It's better to have an idea. Because like the cardinal blessing his clubs to have a better golf game. That, like, when you think about it, doesn't help religion, doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that is the kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I don't know how many have done it, but a good number probably have done something dumb like that. And it's like I said, I think it depends who you are, but yes and no.
It tackles the religion head on as well without disregarding the lessons it's trying to teach you. Josh just talked about pain. Well, poor Bethany, throughout this entire journey, and even before she's featured in this movie, has gone through a world of pain. And whether I like it or not, that specific sects of Christianity teach you that pain is necessary to achieve the glory after you pass on. This movie clearly delivers that is a blessing and a curse of the religion, because after she goes through this journey, she suffered physically, mentally, spiritually, almost thanks to Jay being Jay, almost sexually, but you know, that's just Jay's character.
Hey, whoa. I will give this. The homeboy got consent.
Yes, homeboy did get consent, but it was consent that was not to be utilized whenever he deemed it. He was following the doctrine, so to speak, that she had delivered, but it wasn't necessarily the most appropriate way to go about it. I find Jay to be hilarious because he's the kind of guy that he doesn't give a shit on surface level, but deep down he'll take a bullet for you. But at the end, Bethany, after even suffering a rather painful death, is given her reward. Christianity, time and time again, shows you, oh, you have this wonderful family? Well, fuck you. I'm gonna burn them into nothing. I'm gonna have you suffer for being spiritual and obeying my law. And if you argue, you're going to suffer more. But if you don't, then here you go. Here's a brand new family. Here's a brand new car. You've done it. You've won the game of suffering. And that's what
his name was Job. His name was Job. Put some respect on it.
I don't think this movie was blasphemous at all.
No,
not a single bit. He actually treats anyone that deserves respect with respect. God never comes off as like it's never being disrespected, other than briefly by the angels, well, Loki not even that much, but even Bartleby has a like come to Jesus moment, come to God moment in the end. Like there is no figure in this movie that's bigger than God, and also all other, like, no one is being mocked other than the ones that deserve to being mocked. Like if you want to mock the cardinal, rightfully so. First, it's not, again, there's the difference, right, between religion and belief. One thing is just an institutionalized mechanism, or like an institution that is man-made, versus actually believing in something, in a higher power. So in the cardinal abusing his powers by creating like new rules how to make it into heaven, and by blessing his golf club, all of those things. So this is a figure that deserves to be mocked, but God is never being mocked. They never speak bad of like Jesus. Well, it sounds maybe bad to some, but those, again, as Steve said, don't have the actual right belief system. They call themselves Christians, but still don't live by their credo. Like, no one should feel offended by saying Jesus was black, God might be a woman. Like, that is not offensive. So I don't actually think that the movie was blasphemous at all. Of course, there's strong language, but how is that blasphemous? Especially it's not being used against God, if you will.
You know what, though? I'm going to say this, and I kind of hope Kevin Smith hears this words. That movie committed a great sin, and I am very disappointed. We had Salma Hayek in a strip club and did not see her tits. I'm just saying that was there, and we missed it.
He did not do full frontal until 2006 in Ask the Dust.
Also, how does Salma Hayek look better now than she did back then? That's the other question.
When we talk about the budget was 10 million. I think you would have to pay her even more than just the whole budget of that movie.
Yeah, because she was hot off of her big role in Desperado and was sought after for other movies, some not that great, because the movie she did right after this, do you remember what it was, Josh?
I don't, but if you say it, I'll probably will.
Wild Wild West was what she did right after this.
Oof.
Is that the one with Will Smith?
Yeah, Will Smith, and that hit her a little bit, but it's Salma Hayek. She's come back from worse films since Wild Wild West, but Wild Wild West was a low point. This was not a bad film for her. In fact, I feel that those who are cinephiles, when they want to follow an actor or actress, this is one of those films for her that really stands out.
Because she does a great job with Serendipity, especially because it's like she plays that like she does a lot of explanation dump, but it doesn't feel that way with her deliveries. And she's definitely like the apple polisher, but she does it well where you're actually rooting for her.
Mm-hmm. And she stands as a good example of not being a blasphemer against God, because if she were blaspheming in any way, she would have been like the other people in this film that were actual blasphemers and met a horrible end. The cardinal, he utilized his power in a blasphemous way. He met a horrible end. The movie's corporate board, they met awful, but still hilarious in some ways.
Also, how the fuck did that get into a Disney-owned movie?
Well, Miramax, fortunately, even though Disney had Miramax, they were able to have these more violent films because Miramax, if I remember, also produced Pulp Fiction.
I'm not talking about the violence. I'm talking about them straight up mocking the mouse.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Ignore all the splatter. Yeah, no, there was like, so you have bi-coastal theme parks and you have, you couldn't be more precise. I'm like, yeah, this is Disney.
It's what's crazy too is because like, okay, like not a lot from Mallrats or Chasing Amy's has made it into the other movies, but because of Clerks 2, movies, that brand is like one of the biggest parts of the cinematic universe, which is so weird.
It is, but it's something that's in the culture to this day because we've had pop-up movies each time Kevin Smith has brought back the Askew-verse. When Reboot came out, they had pop-ups for that. When Clerks 3 came out last year, they brought the pop-ups back. So that's pretty awesome.
That's probably like one of the scenes I always remembered because like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck definitely killed it in that. Especially, I don't know why, just the little things like how did you forget the magazines? Like, why does this matter? You're about to murder everyone in this room.
It's about the statement. But is this, speaking of universes, more cinematic universes, so is this the first MCU movie because Matt Damon plays Loki, also in Thor Ragnarok and Love and Thunder? So he's Loki here. Is that the tie-in? Or does he play Loki over there in the MCU because of this movie?
I won't lie, because like Loki is clearly like, back then Thor wasn't big. Like no one knew who Loki was, so whatever. Because I think it's like, it's clear he didn't want to use actual angels' names because it's like, meh. But like Barnaby, I couldn't figure out where that name came from. That was the one Affleck's character, because I'm like, this isn't Norris. Like, where does this come from? Oh God!
Did you do that research, or do we have to Google now?
I did like 2 minutes, so not really. But also, why did you? You just ruined Dogma in a little ways by pointing out he played Loki twice.
He played Loki more times outside of Dogma. Well, Dogma is one movie. Fortunately, we never got a second one.
Maybe he's going to be in Loki season 2.
Like I said, I don't want them to like. I would love to like. Man, this is where like being Rick and Morty would be nice. It'd be interesting to go to the universe and see Jason Leigh play that character. Because he did a phenomenal job as Azrael, but man, he could have chewed up some of those scenes.
Yeah, I just Googled Barnaby Angel, and the first, like out of the first 10 entries, 8 of them are Dogma. So it feels like it's a character that was like invented just for the movie. It's not an actual angel.
He's a Herman Melville character. His name translates to one who barters. It's not an actual angel.
No, like I knew it wasn't an actual angel, but that actually makes sense. Because yeah, he was the one who bartered. That actually makes okay. Because I think Kevin Smith didn't want to put any actual angels' names because it's like that's getting
not to be blasphemous.
Yeah, it's like that's getting a little too close for me. Because like Golgotha, it's like that. No one remembers the name because that's the mountain that Jesus was crucified on.
He does put in an actual figure that I guess, again, there's no movie about it, so no one knows it. But the Metadon, being an actual Metatron, an actual character, this was maybe mentioned once in the Bible. I don't know. I tried to Google yesterday, and there are some mentions there that this is actually a thing. But yeah, no one knows about it.
Yeah.
Acting as Bethany's mentor in her hero's journey. Also, like a perfect hero's journey. She has the mentor. She has the ups and downs, the crisis of faith, getting through that and coming out on top in the end, stronger and obviously in a new role. Perfect hero's journey example there. If anyone wants to study that movie a little bit deeper.
So out of curiosity, so I'd like to ask the panel this. How did you all feel about the whole Last Zion bit with her?
I like the idea. I mean, why not? I don't know how I feel about the like, oh, you're actually not the last because there's a baby in your belly. I don't know how I felt about that part, but the concept that, I mean, there had to be a reason for her to be chosen. Like, and she, yeah, in the beginning, is just a random person. So it's like they needed an explanation why her, for her character to get that answer and for us to get that answer. So I think it's a legitimate way of answering that.
Oh, I was okay with it, but the Chaos didn't do a whole lot with her.
See, I wasn't a fan of that because it's like outside of her blessing the bar, like you didn't really need her to be the Last Zion. Because especially like in some ways, if she was just a normal human, that might have been like a bigger impact, especially the whole like, why am I supposed to do this? I'm just no one. But like, I don't know, her having like some of the powers of Christ, because it's like, can she walk on water? Can she cure the blind? Like, what can she do? And it's almost at the very, like you said, when it's like, oh, you're no longer the last. Because it's like, well, is it because she died? And it's like, because I feel like I don't know. It's like just God going like, hey, you did me a solid. Let's fix a uterus.
I actually really liked it because if we look at it again through a religious lens, it almost acts as and it's almost analogous to when Jesus is out in the desert being tempted and trying to figure out, get your life right, Jesus. He's being tempted. He has to decide whether or not he wants to accept the fact that he's the Son of God. Well, throughout this film, Bethany is questioning what her purpose is. She was going to be a mother. She was a wife. Both those things were taken away from her. So when this information is presented to her, it instills new purpose in her, whether she really wants to accept it. And fortunately, we didn't have to wait, 25 years before Jesus comes back into being known, because I think he was like 25 when he started performing miracles, something like that. We didn't have to wait 25 years worth of screen time for her to realize that she can be true to what she's meant to be, but do it in her own way. It worked for me because she could have probably accessed the power deep within her earlier, but it wasn't until she actually needed to that she was able to unlock it. And again, she might have been able to unleash that in that final battle, but she instead chose to take that risk and wound up sacrificing her life to save God instead.
Well, like I said, I hear you on everything until you got to the last battle. I was agreeing until the last battle part, because it's like she didn't use any of her powers because all she did was unplug. She took God off the respirator. Any human could have done that.
That is true.
Because in some ways, if Jay wasn't horny, the world would have stopped existing.
So
He said the
one
movie.
thing that I might have missed or didn't catch right away, how did she get her wound? Like I said, just she woke up God and then started bleeding out of nowhere.
When
think the fourth-
God woke up, the blast kind of forced her into the wall, and it almost seemed like the glass from the window breaking was forced into her abdomen. So she wound up dying from the wound and had to be resurrected.
Or let's go back into religion. Because, okay, Jesus was crucified with the nails. That was a unique thing. But typically, how one died from crucifixion was asphyxiation or suffocation. You couldn't breathe. God, what a Porky Pig moment. Because the problem was you hanging there, you can't physically hold yourself up. So your diaphragm keeps like compressing on itself. So a way they would test if you died or not, or if they wanted to kill you quicker, was taking a spear into your side and penetrating your lungs. Hence how we got the whole spear of destiny. So her getting killed that way, I kind of read it as the same way Jesus died.
So we have you here.
I told you we're going deep.
There is no shallow end with this movie. Kevin Smith takes you as if you were a toddler and just throws you down the end zone of the pool into the deep end.
Well, we're already there, because in the chat I mentioned, because Jay had a line where it's like, I heard if you do anal, you fart. And I mentioned that was true, not because I was trying to be gross, but because it's like Kevin Smith's always right. Even on weird lines you throw away, like, that's just a random, like, weird thing Jay says. It's like, no, he's an extremely smart individual. He just wraps it up in poop, shit, and weed jokes.
One of the most goofier scenes was like when I think it was Bethany asking Alanis Morissette, or like God, why are we here? And she responds just with the boop, like on the nose. It's like, that actually also makes sense. Like, just God had a mood. It's like, I don't know, I was bored, kind of non-verbal way to say, I was bored. Like, I just did that. But like, that's why you're here. Because why not? and then goes off and does a handstand. Like even that part, which seems to be improvised, like kind of
See,
nice.
I always read that as like, oh, you're adorable. You won't be able to understand this. Boop.
And to me, it's less. Well, it's random. Existence is random. I just had a mood. I just created you guys. Like I don't know. I might do something else tomorrow.
Exactly.
Also,
For now, humans are the dominant species, but depending upon whether or not it was Wednesday or it's Taco Tuesday, platypus could have been the dominant species.
The platypus, oh, the poor
Also,
platypus got their raps in the opening sequence.
also, it always like, man, the idea of God loving skee ball. Because what I like about that is like one, yeah, he created humans, but it's like I don't see him like creating skee ball or her creating skee ball. So it's this random like, yeah, that seems fun. Two, there's no real winners or losers. You're just playing. Because it's not like I defeated blah 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 skee ball. It's like no, higher score. I'm against myself. So it's like a non-confrontational, fun, random event. Like yeah. Now, granted, it's like he probably picked that because he grew up in Jersey, and it's a random like skee ball.
See, I'm probably digging way too deep into that sequence, but again, tying it back to the Bible, after the Old Testament, God decided he was going to let people make their own decisions. He was going to give them the Savior he'd been promised, but he was going to let them have free will. The New Testament was not like the Old Testament where, oh, you're a bunch of dicks. I'm going to turn you all to salt. I'm going to flood the earth. Oh, you think you're hot stuff? Well, we're going to give you this hot chick. She's going to cut your hair and you're not going to be able to barely move anything anymore. No, people have free will at that point. So I kind of view the skeet ball sequence and God enjoying it as he's just letting everything fall to chance, kind of like he let humanity make their own choices and everything was left to chance and out of his hands as long as he allowed for it to be. God could have controlled the scores he got in skeet ball, but he was just having fun. He was just happy to let the balls go in whatever holes they go in.
So one of my favorite primary teachers, man, this guy, like honestly, a lot of religions would be a better place if they had more of him. But he always mentioned like, so in the Mormon religion, you had the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenant, which Book of Mormon mimics the Old Testament, Doctrine and Covenant mimics the New Testament. But he had an analogy, which I'm like, to this day, I'm like, wow, this fits perfectly. He's like, if you look at the Old Testament through Doctrine and Covenant, so these 4 different times, like Old Testament is when you have little kids. You have to be very simple with them. You can't explain stuff. It's like, don't stick a fork in here. And it's like kids are like, you're being mean. It's like, I'm not. I'm trying to keep you alive. New Testaments, they're a little smarter, a little older. So it's like, as each one goes on, you treat them more and more like adults.
Also, what is there left to do for a God that is all powerful? Like, can create another species on a different planet. I don't know, but like, yeah, maybe just enjoy skee ball.
Now, I was about to say, real deep in the Mormon religion, that's the goal. Because the idea is like, if you're good enough, you can eventually become Jesus to your own planet of people, and the cycle continues.
I like the idea of the angels getting a bad rep, like getting screwed as a first like attempt. It's like, well, the angels had to do everything God said, and then humans kind of had free will and could decide. Again, not that familiar with the Bible.
That I know, like a couple. It depends on like which religion, because like in the Mormon religion, angels were just people. Like you're not on Earth, so you're an angel. Like you're not. But it's like Catholicism, like some older school ones. Because like, have you ever seen Bible accurate angels?
I don't think so.
I think I saw a YouTube video once where
Yeah, I
it's
was
like
gonna
that's
say.
how angels would look like if you were accurate. It's like, oh, that doesn't look good.
Don't worry, we'll be posting those later in the Discord because that is nightmare fuel. Ugh. So wait a minute, because I've been talking way too much. James, anything you want to talk about with this movie?
No, we kind of. I think you covered everything pretty much.
One little thing.
I don't.
Oh,
I was trying to think what else to talk about.
Well,
I know
there's a few things like maybe just tie-ins, not really about the movie, but the movie touches on a few things. Like apparently we haven't come that far in the abortion debate in the last 24
No.
years as it's as hot as ever. Like that was a thing back then. That's even a bigger thing right now, I guess. The other thing is that movie was definitely before the Catholic Church was found guilty of child abuse, because when they confronted the cardinal of what the church had done wrong, they didn't bring that up. It's like, how can you, like, your role during the Second World War? It's like, wait, that's the worst thing you want to bring. Like, how can you not add this to the list? But I guess that was all before all of this crap came out.
yeah, because this movie came out in 1990, so it was made in 1998.
1999, yeah.
Well, I'm saying
made in 99.
in the yeah. I don't think, like, I could double check. I think that was mid 2000s when that scandal broke with the Catholic Church.
Yeah, there have been rumors and there have been reports here or there, but they were always able to cover it up. It was not until the levee really broke in the mid 2000s that, yeah, there was no avoiding it. And then the investigations really dug deep.
That was probably the most unrealistic part in this movie, the cardinal being convinced by those weak arguments when the Catholic Church to this day isn't being doesn't acknowledge all of those things with even stronger arguments. Like the way the cardinal kind of like changed his opinion was a little bit like, oh, that was fast. Like where has that been the last 20 years?
I was going to say with the cardinal, though, he seemed like he was more PR. So it's like he agreed with, like, to me, it's like he will agree with the point to get off it as quickly as possible. He's not going to fight it. He doesn't want them to stay on it. Also, now granted, I'm not as religious anymore and I'm never been Catholic. I feel like Buddy Christ, though, is a better version of Christ.
I was about to say, why doesn't, like, that's something the Catholic Church should take away from this. Like, don't work with guilt. Work more with love. Buddy Jesus is like a perfect, and I mean, it's super cheesy, but I know there are some, especially in South America, there are some countries that live like this image of Jesus superstar, right? That kind of image, as cheesy as it might be, I think it helps the message more than the whole guilt trip the Catholic Church tries to enforce.
Yeah, and I could honestly see if, one, they didn't have their message about preferences, and if they hadn't already found a mascot in the cow they have, I could definitely see the movie's mascot and Buddy Christ going to bat for Chick-fil-A.
I was going to say, if you ever go to Dragon Con, you're almost guaranteed to see someone dress up like Buddy Christ to this day.
Oh, Otakon as well. The last few I went to, they had Buddy Christ.
Because
every church needs like a cardboard stand.
God, speaking of, okay, so back in the day, and I'm getting older, so nostalgia's kicking in. I had some of them, but I didn't go. I kind of wish I went more deep, and I have no idea what happened to them. But they released what was called the in-action figures from the View Askew.
Yeah.
Because they had the Clerks cartoon by, I forget the artist, it's the same guy who did the character designs for Kim Possible. But they made these little statues of like each one of the characters. And it's one of these, to this day, I'm like, I kind of wish more movies did this, where it's like, here's a goofy, I think it was like $10 back in the day, like goofy little figure. Like, this is before the whole Pops thing took over. Problem is now, one, Kevin Smith like signed all of them. So it's like any of them on sale now. It's like, oh, signed by Kevin Smith. We want $100. It's like, I don't want it signed by Kevin Smith.
Yeah, and that was something that Steven Silver, the Kim Possible guy you were just talking about, that he was happy to do because he was a fan of Smith's work. I mean, you had Scott Mosier partnering with Steven Silver to make sure that those designs really popped, since the Clerks animated series obviously came out a few years before Kim Possible. But because Smith was so charismatic back in the day, pretty much up until the point where the disputes on set with Bruce Willis for Cop Out became a public thing, he was considered to be very charismatic, that he was able to also convince a Seinfeld writer, if I remember correctly, to help write some of the episodes of the Clerks animated series after it was found out that that writer was a huge fan of Dogma and Chasing Amy.
Have either of you guys seen the Clerks animated series?
I think I've seen it when it was on TV years ago, but I haven't watched it recently.
Man, like the only shitty thing is it was on ABC Family, so they had to change like Jay and Silent Bob sold fireworks instead of drugs, which you're like, really? But what's crazy is they took like, okay, we want this a like PG rating. They still did amazing things that fit in that universe.
They were promised 13 episodes and they only got 6.
You know how like in a lot of shows they'll do the like flashback with all the different clips, like showing like what happened in the season or the previous episodes? They did that for episode 2. And it's like one of the funniest things I've ever seen, even though it shouldn't be, because it's just them going back to the first episode.
Is Kevin Smith not seen as charismatic anymore?
I think he's regained some of his fans and some of the love from Hollywood because he was willing to eventually admit that he was wrong, that yes, Willis was kind of acting like an ass and saw himself as the end all be all for Cop Out, but Smith shouldn't have reacted the way he did. You don't engage in verbal altercations on set. You take it somewhere private and have that discussion, even if it is filled with vitriol from time to time. You don't do this out where the public can make their own interpretations of it. It did not help that his films post, I want to say, Zach and Mary make a porno, so Cop Out fits that.
James and Bob Strike Back.
Oh, you don't like Zach and Mary?
Well, okay, here's the thing. Let me tag in on this, because like I said, I'm way too big into Smith. After Jay and because Jay and Silent Bob was like the love letter. He's like, okay, tired of this weird weed Jersey universe I made. I'm gonna go make real films. He then made Jersey Girl, which the problem with that movie had was Geely, like everyone was tired of Ben Affleck and J-Lo. Also, I think like Jersey State kind of screwed him over on that. Like,
I enjoyed that movie.
Oh, I did too. And it's a shame that he's only been able to show the original cut of that once so far, because I've heard that the original cut actually makes the film better.
That was a financial flop. So he then made Clerks 2, which did well. He then starts to do some other stuff, including like he had a guest appearance in Live Free or Die Hard. He was a minor role in that. Hence how he got with Bruce Willis. Then he made
on Joey for an episode as well, unfortunately.
But then he made Cop Out, and that's the only film he's never written but directed. So it's one of these like, it's not like I've never seen it, but it's one of these, from what I've been told, it's not a good movie. It's just a generic cop movie. But him and Bruce Willis are definitely like very different work-wise, because Bruce Willis saw him unprofessional because of all the weed. Kevin Smith didn't like being questioned. So yeah, like Steven was saying, he took that to the public ground. but it's also that film bombed. He then did Red State.
Red State, which bombed. He did Tusk, which bombed.
Sorry, he then did Zack and Miri, which the Weinstein Group didn't advertise correctly. And because it was called Zack and Miri Made a Porno, a lot of channels wouldn't show the commercial because they didn't want to promote pornography. So that bombed.
It's one of the movies I watched. I didn't watch Cop Out, but I watched that movie.
I'll say that one doesn't feel like a Kevin Smith movie because, like, when I think Kevin Smith movies, I think tight script. That he was trying to do that whole, it's like, let's go off the top of our head, just see what comes up. And it's like, it doesn't work for Kevin Smith.
It was his tribute to the weird 80s movie trend. And I think it works. But like you said, it doesn't come off as a Kevin Smith film. And it bombed. Red State came out. It bombed. If Zack and Miri did anything right beyond helping keep Seth Rogen in the public eye and helping, I think that was Elizabeth Banks in that movie, wasn't it?
I think so.
Helped push her forward. And that formed his relationship with Justin Long. For better or for worse, Justin Long is what made Tusk bearable for a lot of your average moviegoers who were not familiar with the tropes of the B horror movies. Is Tusk a good movie? I don't think compared to his earlier work it is, but I think it is leaps and bounds above Cop Out, and it definitely stands out more so than Yoga Hosers, the second film in the canceled what was it, the Far North trilogy, because they were supposed to conclude it with Moose Jaws. During this time, Smith also kind of came out as entitled in the public eye because there was that whole incident with him complaining about having to buy an extra seat on an airplane because he was a little larger than your average, according to the airline, passenger. He's since lost weight, even before he had his cardiac arrest incident, and before he dropped weed, he lost a lot of weight. It wasn't until, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, it wasn't until he started moving away from the comic book men persona and started being real again instead of putting on a performance every time that he came back into the public eye in a good way.
So I was going to say, not to go long story, really short, he started doing more podcasting and more like speeches and being like, hey, I'm Silent Bob. And yeah, comic book men, that was a terrible, like, I'm not the only one here. That was a terrible show, right?
Oh, they were just nasty. I have a couple friends who actually made it on the show and said that it was just a terrible experience.
Like, it's literally like the worst version of comic book fans, but in reality TV show, it's like, yay.
It's like Pawn Stars in the worst way possible. You come in to buy the first appearance of Black Panther, and they want to charge triple the price. Or you come in to sell Secret Wars 8, the first appearance of the black costume, and they want to underpay for it by like 80%.
It's like, oh, that's only worth 50 cents. But it's also like, it's them bragging like, ha, this old woman doesn't know what she has. She's starving, but we got a good deal off her. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, that podcast, I think he used to call it Fat Man on Batman, was a good way for him to really speak his truth and deal with his mental health issues, because he really struggled for a long time with his mental health, and he had to overcome his religious upbringing. He, to a certain extent, had to overcome his ego before he could really open up and talk about his struggles with weed, his struggle with his upbringing, dealing with his father's death, helping Jason Mewes become sober multiple times. He had actually for a little while ended their friendship because he had to put his family first. His relationship with Ben Affleck deteriorated because Affleck had gone into the world of alcoholism, and Smith didn't need to deal with that in his life when he was already having to deal with a a friend under the influence of heroin and marijuana. I don't remember if Mewes did meth or anything like that.
The good news, you're mostly right. I will say this because Mewes, I don't think they ever officially ended their friendship because he threatened to, and that's when Mewes went to rehab. He's been sober for 12 years now. So the other weird thing is and like I said, Steven's 100% there. Because the other weird thing is, ever since he's had his heart attack, I think we're starting to get rid of this current Smith iteration. We'd get it almost felt like a bit. Like he would cry at every he cried at every trailer. And it's he was a very MCU could do no wrong, which is cool, but it didn't feel it kind of felt are you a fan or are they paying you? It was this weird, I don't know. Because then the other thing is he kind of screwed up with the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So
what do you mean? Oh, wait. What do you mean he screwed up? I think that was one of his best. This is he absolutely nailed Masters of the Universe, in my opinion. It's true to the comic version, it's true to the original. The only thing he did was piss off some people because he made a female character a little bit more present than it would have been in the 80s. But the whole mythology is down to the T.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not a He-Man fan. I am not dying on this hill. I am just reporting the facts. Do not attach me to this.
I will tell you, Torsen. Actually, go ahead, James. You like He-Man.
I enjoy the series. It's better than the original series.
The problem, this is where it got some problems. One, before he got He-Man, he admitted somewhere he's never been a He-Man fan. So He-Man fans lost their shit when he got the reins to this. Two, and this was Netflix started doing this, which was dumb. They cut the series in half. So you had the first 6 episodes, then the last 6 episodes. Because of this drama, their audience dropped 50%. Most people never saw the second half. So it's been a failure.
And there's a season 2 coming out too, a part 2.
But that was all under the same umbrella. That was technically supposed to be one season. They started doing this half season bullshit.
Yeah, personally, I'm a fan of what he did because of the fact that the characters were a little bit more defined. It was the best of the 80s show combined with the best of the, 2003 series that wound up getting canceled. Yeah. The problem I had with it is that people didn't really give it a fair shot. They were expecting pretty much the 2003 series, and what we got was a series that explored why He-Man is such an integral part of that story. You take him off the board for a little while, and the other characters are oh crap, what the heck do we do now? Some of them sunk into deep.
Not only that, but what he does while he's gone. I mean, he was gone from that playing field, but without spoilers, he was a part of a separate playing field. And that is also true to the comics. This is when Kevin Smith says he's a fan of He-Man, he's at least, I don't know if it was a lucky shot, but he stayed true to the comics. If you have that omnibus, a great read, cover to cover. But his show is absolutely tying into that mythology. But the 80s was just to sell the toys, right? They created some mythology along the way, but it was never meant to be this deep character study of those different characters. Not only He-Man, everyone in there has a role to play and has a character arc that the comic really fleshed out. And for him to pick it up at that point and not just tie it back to the 80s, I think that was it was a great show. And now I'm looking forward to the second season.
Are they making?
What's that?
Yes.
Oh, I heard. Like I said, I'm not dying on this hill. I heard that it flopped, so Netflix was not picking that up again.
No,
there is a second season of that coming. What Netflix canceled was the live action film.
Okay, because like I said, I heard like I said, I'm not the biggest He-Man fan because I watched the first half. I never watched the second half, not because I was like, there's just more like that's the other problem with splitting this stuff up. By the time it came around, I was like, I'm watching other stuff. Um, but like I said,
Missing
I knew
out.
there was the internet. It was the internet versus Kevin Smith for a while there.
Yeah, it did not help that at the same time fans were waiting for part 2 of season 1 to start up. They had that more child-friendly version of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, that wasn't the best.
No, I mean, they tried. I feel like they were kind of going for the same energy that the recent She-Ra series had, which was actually a lot of fun, but it did not wow me. I know I'm not the demographic because I'm not between the ages of 5 and 8, but still, even looking at it from a younger perspective, it just didn't really work. You shouldn't have He-Man calling Skeletor a goober. That doesn't work for me.
I beg to differ. I was like, I love the 2003 He-Man. Outside of that, I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and my hope was that we would eventually see a revival, but then Netflix wound up picking up the license, and we got what we got. So I'm pretty happy with that too. If Kevin Smith continues alongside it, cool. If not, if there's another showrunner and writer involved, then I'm fine with it too, because the comics that have spun out of that show have been pretty great too. We had the Revelation tie-in, and recently we had the series tackling the multiverse of He-Man, where you had He-Man characters from all across the multiverse tie-in, and they actually hit pretty hard on some of the more corny elements and kind of dig at the fact that you could tell that it was all about the toys in the 80s, because the second that sales started dipping just a little bit with the toys, what did they do? They canceled the cartoon and relaunched it as the new Adventures of He-Man, and they threw him into outer space.
I've never seen that series.
The next best thing.
That was the single greatest moment of my life was watching that show. I mean, just tears of joy when he went into space. I've never seen that show. No, I feel like because there's like classic Kevin Smith, and it's weird because I haven't seen Reboot or Clerks 3 yet. Because the problem with like I wanted to see Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, but he was doing like the road show, and there was like limited time. Like it was hard to see, and you had to buy like $80 tickets. Like it wasn't made for like the casual fan. Like it was definitely made for.
I had to buy the Blu-ray before I saw that, because I was not paying $125 and driving to Philly to go see it. I will say Reboot is only for the hardcore fans. If you're coming in off the street having never seen a Kevin Smith movie, I understand why that movie gets the hate it does, because it's nostalgia hit after nostalgia hit. You may as well just inject that right into your eye sockets. There's so much nostalgia, so many callbacks. But Clerks, on the other hand, it really deals with what it means to have to confront mortality and how to move forward in the wake of tragedy. Clerks 2, hands down, is my favorite Kevin Smith film for me, because mainly of the character Elias, because I was that mofo growing up. I was basically the 40-year-old virgin growing up. So I loved that because he had to learn and grow, and you see him growing, not necessarily in the right way throughout that movie. And it teaches you that even if you feel you've got a happy ending, life's going to throw you a curveball, and you have to decide whether or not you're going to hit it or you're going to get hit by it. If you get hit by it, you still have to find some way to push forward. I saw that in theaters last September, and it's one of the few movies in the last decade where I've teared up during the movie. And I will openly admit as well to loving Clerks 2 and Clerks 3 because I love Rosario Dawson as an actress and as a human being. And she just knows how to fit well in that world. Anything gross, it's like it doesn't even faze her when she's in character. And anything emotional, she's able to pull whatever she has to work within that role. If she had been in the role of Bethany in Dogma, I could have seen her pulling that off because, as you know, Kevin Smith likes to reuse actors in different roles. I mean, look at how many different roles Affleck has played in the Askewverse. I think we're up to 4 or 5 at this point.
Well, because he's also, I think it's only 3. Well, it's 4 if you count himself, because he replays characters, because he played himself in Jane and Silent Bob Strikes Back. Barnaby or whatever, the angel, the clerks from Mallrats, the trying to screw her in a very uncomfortable place, and then the main character from Chasing Amy.
He's in Clerks 3 as a new character.
Okay, I haven't seen. Yeah, because the only thing I kind of wish, and it's like clearly we never got this. I wish we had like one more Kevin Smith movie before Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and also. I love Jay and Silent Bob. I feel like he felt like he was tied to those characters. And I'm like, you have a wealth of other characters. Because, like, if Mallrats did better, we might have gotten more from that IP. But
yeah, if Jeremy London had been brought back and played a main role in Dogma, I don't think it would have necessarily been a bad thing because Party of Five was also still fresh in the minds of people in the 90s. They would have gone to see Dogma if he was still in it. It just so happens that Matt Damon was the better choice for that because you can't say that Party of Five is better quality than Good Will Hunting.
And I will say this about Dogma, and it's part of Kevin Smith, but like rewatching this, there was a lot of like just static scenes where it's like people talking around like, and it's like, I wish, especially like them walking, it's like, yeah, why didn't we have a conversation with like them walk, like just a little bit of movement would I think help some of the scenes. Because like the very end with the bar where they're just talking and it's like, do something, like make a drink. I don't know. It just feels like a lot of his actors are just constantly just like standing and talking. Like
that's kind of why I wish that Alan Rickman had been an even larger part of that movie, because having seen some of his plays and seen him in other dramatic roles, that man steals a scene. Maybe that's why he didn't use him, but to have more intimate conversations with Rickman being involved would have been a real treat as well.
Because I feel like
this stands to me still as one of his best movies.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
Because this is nitpicking, because the only other thing I wish we had one scene with the Angels. Like they're trying to get to Jersey, but before they know about the whole, because it feels like we just need like one more scene before he goes like straight Morning Star, like something where it's like how, you know, especially if it was like Loki being like, I don't know, man, I'm kind of, you know, it's like I have my cartoons, you know, Wisconsin isn't bad. Maybe we shouldn't do this. Like a little second thought. And him being like, we're doing this, we're going, like, because I think that would have driven it home a little bit more. But like I said, that's a very small thing.
I was also kind of hoping that he would bring in, what's his name? Brian Anderson from Clerks, Dante, to kind of comment on the religious upheaval that was going on in the movie.
Oh, well, I was about to say Dante, it's his cousins in it, was the newscaster.
Yeah, and I like that. I just kind of would have liked, with Dante being a Jew, for him to have been able to interject in the religious upheaval that was going on throughout the movie.
So that's the other, just because hopefully someone is watching this later. Because like this was the first movie that Randall came back because he refused to be in Mallrats or Chasing Amy because he wasn't getting paid enough. Trish the Dish was the nun at the very beginning of the movie. We never saw her. Gwyneth Paltrow is in the airport. She was supposed to be in it, but got cut. Just a random, she was like right next to Ben Affleck, but her like the segment just got cut. Who else was in it? Oh, you got like Scott Mosier. You got like a lot of the classics from the original Skewiverse. Because I forget the DP's name got fired from this. That's why this movie looks different, because Weinstein demanded a different director of photography.
Maybe we'll get some sort of follow-up to this, even if it's not Dogma 2, because even though actors have passed on, at this point, Smith has repaired 95% of any damaged or worn relationships. And it takes a lot for a man like Smith, who was on top of the world, to reach out to people that feel that have been wronged by him. But he's done that. And supposedly his next film is going to be Twilight of the Mallrats after all these years. There was a campaign back in, I want to say it was 2012 or 2013, and each new tier of this online campaign, he would reveal a little bit about Mallrats. So Michael Rooker is still committed to it. Jeremy London's still committed to it. Smith's original girlfriend, what's her name? Joey Lawrence Adams or something like that. She's committed to it. Everyone is committed to it. So if they can do that, I'd love to see some sort of follow-up to Dogma, even if it's not a Dogma 2. You can call it something different. And if people send death threats because he's just trying to make a statement, then that says more about them than it does about him.
So an early script of this movie leaked online, and like 90% of it didn't make the final cut. And a lot of the protest was because of that. He found out like a church was protesting Dogma, so he joined the protests. And like an idiot, he's out there. No one recognized him until the newscast came in, and they're like, "So you're the director, right?" He's like, "No, I was told not to like this film, so I'm out here."
Next year is the 25th anniversary of Dogma, so maybe we'll get some news then.
I will say this. I wouldn't even mind if they did like Dogma 2 as a comic. Like, I don't know if I need I would like to revisit some of this stuff, even if it wasn't in film, if it was just in comics, because God, the Clerks comic was a lot of fun, especially because they showed the scene in the funeral parlor.
Oh my word, that was amazing too.
Wait, have either of you two seen Mallrats?
I have not.
I don't remember it.
So that's the best Easter movie we've ever gotten.
See, I always, so again, not knowing who Kevin Smith was when I first watched this movie, I always associate this movie with another movie that's also about angels, also in the 90s. And those two movies kind of went hand in hand, even though it had nothing to do with each other, which is The Prophecy from 95 with Christopher Walken. And to me, those were my 90s movies with angels. It's like there's Dogma and The Prophecy, which I really have to rewatch that one.
Heaven Can Wait's not on that list, Tor?
Which one?
Heaven Can Wait.
Oh, sheesh.
Again, me growing up in Germany, they translated. I don't even know what that movie is. They might have had a different German title. Like The Prophecy in German was called God's Army, but like English, in the English title, God's Army. And it was like a few years ago when I searched, like, I want to rewatch this movie. Search God's Army. There's another movie in English called God's Army, which had nothing to do, complete different movie. It's like, how was this movie called if they changed the name? But they changed the name from an English name to an English name. But yeah, in English was released as The Prophecy.
See, there are a couple different versions of Heaven Can Wait because it's made off of a play, but Heaven Can Wait is what they called overseas the Chris Rock film Down to Earth, where he dies and ends up having to possess, I think it's an elderly white guy in order to make right what he did wrong in his life.
Yeah, I have not watched that one. I'm looking at it right now from 78.
Yeah, that's the Warren Beatty.
That's a sports movie, right?
Down to
It's like
Earth.
around a football team.
Yeah. The one I'm talking about is, I think it's 2000 or 2001. In some overseas markets, they called it Heaven Can Wait, but here in the U.S., they called it Down to Earth. It's got Chris Rock in it.
Yeah, because that's one I remember.
Gotcha.
Like, I remember that poster. 2001. I don't remember much of that movie.
I remember the scene where he's singing hardcore rap and it switches over to this old dude because that's the body he's in singing it. And he's using the hard R because he's singing along with the song, and he almost gets his butt beat by the African American gentleman in the other traffic lane next to him.
I think I've heard about this movie. The trailer didn't really, like, I don't know. If you recommend Down to Earth, I might watch it, but it doesn't feel like a movie I would it seems like slapstick.
It's not
comedy.
Great. That's kind of the joke.
What I thought.
I personally enjoy
20% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I personally enjoy The Prophecy.
He's on his own. Down to Earth, Steven's on his own. I am not backing that one.
No, please don't, because that would be like backing Norbit up, and no one wants to do that either.
Well, you're bringing up, man, Pluto Nash, let's just bring up all those bad comedy.
Let's put a lid on Dogma. I think we've said everything there's to say about Dogma, unless everyone wants to do their final take, and then we can talk about Norbit afterwards.
I was going to say, there is one thing I have to say. I might get kicked off of this, but I heard this on TikTok, and I'm like, I wanted to post this on the NMC, but I'm like, woof. But we're 2 hours in, and I'm doing this. So someone pointed out on TikTok, it's like, you do realize Jesus saw all sin and said, yeah, I think I'll take that on, including someone looking at Waluigi hentai. And Jesus went, yeah, I'll take that. Dogma.
We're gonna see anyone else.
That was for me. I don't care.
Following Discord, you're gonna post those things on Discord along with how angels looked like, are supposed to be looking like according to the Bible. They're not recognizable as anything you would imagine. So if you're on the NMC Discord, I'm sure there are going to be pictures popping up there right now. We're recording this on September 14th. So scroll back a few days and then you'll find those angel pictures. But I want to thank you.
You want the pictures, Tor? I've got them brought up right here.
We'll get all the pictures into the Discord channel. It's fine.
Also, I guess I will end on this note. I should memorize it. Jason Lee's line about AC is so true.
For sure. Now living in like 90% humidity climate, I couldn't live without AC. So that's the real invention here. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, James. It was a pleasure as always. We'll figure out what we do next. But until then, I'll sample edit. There's not much to edit, but I'll just upload the recording and we'll all get to enjoy the replay.
I'm expecting like the shit demon. I'm expecting a lot of editing with this.
I don't want to have any associates with Weinstein coming after me for my licensing rights if I'm stealing any screenshots. So, see.
Yeah, it's like 3 people from the NMC and Weinstein's company watches this.
They're gonna come after us.